there have been many times throughout college in which I felt completely overwhelmed by either the amount or the level of difficulty of a reading.
So there have been times when I get assigned some reading that is either so impenetrably dense or just so long that I know that I cannot finish it to prep for the next lecture.
In college, professors surprisingly are unaware that you have other classes. And because of this, they assign a huge amount of reading, sometimes hundreds of pages a week. And because your other classes, you also have hundreds of pages of reading a week, you won't be able to read it all. And so at that point, you have to go into some sort of reading triage.
Quite honestly, the best way for me to overcome that was to prime the reading. And for me, that meant doing a little bit of research. Personally, Shmoop was my best friend. So what Shmoop is it's kind of like a SparkNotes type website, and they give you really important historical background information, which really, really helps. So for example, I was reading a book by Stendhal called The Red and the Black, and I did not know very much about the French Revolution. So I went to my friend Shmoop and I learned some of the key vocabulary, and I learned some of the key facts about the war and about the revolution that just I would have not understood. I would have not understood the text without it. So definitely like priming the reading, using these SparkNotes type websites. Wikipedia is great, and also going to office hours, talking to your professors, talking over with somebody who's gone through this material before can really help.
When I was working in an academic support center as a reading and writing coach, I would often have students come in and express that they didn't know how to manage such a large text. And our schedules are busy, we don't have a lot of time, but we're given several hundred pages of reading a week, and there are strategies that you can employ in order to get that done. And one that is often opposed at first, but then is sort of accepted, is the idea of not reading something front to back, but reading it with a purpose, and coming to the reading with a set of questions and saying, these are the questions that I would like to answer while doing this reading. And once you have a purpose for the reading, you won't be reading from front to back. It's not like reading a novel. You're reading something with a purpose. You're extracting information, you're answering questions, and those are the questions that are going to help you in the classroom and help you tackle a large body of reading.
Pre-reading is useful when coming up with a really long text that you don't have a lot of time for, or something that's really dense and technical. Either just kind of doing a quick Google search online for what is this text about, and kind of reading that shorter and pithier amount of information to have a better idea, so that when you're actually engaging with the full text, you have a better understanding, so that you can kind of follow along more easily.
For different kinds of reading, we read novels in order to have sort of reactions to them and feel certain ways. We do the same thing for academic reading, which very well might be a novel, but we do it with a different purpose. Our reactions are not something that we just enjoy for a few minutes and then talk about later with our friends. It's something that you should be recording in the margins and taking notes on, and marking up in the text in order to come back to them later during a discussion section or a seminar or something, when the professor says, what did you think about this? You open your book and you don't have to react again to the same thing. Your reaction is already recorded for you. So when your reaction is recorded in the text, it's ready to go, and it becomes an outline for you to use later.
When I'm taking notes, I use that as a way to both stay engaged in class, to really make sure that I'm absorbing everything, but also So I have an actual marking system on the side of my notes of longer and shorter lines that allows me to distinguish between more and less important information, as well as actually separating between different concepts. Just even, at the beginning of each class, I write down the date, what that class is about, so that I'm able to, with more of a space and a larger line to allow me to flip back through very quickly when studying the notes later for tests, or even just later in the class if there's something that I need to go back and refresh or change. If a student's asking a question about something that I understand a little bit better, and I have a moment to kind of go back and clarify something if I wrote it down or left a question mark, and to kind of continually engage with that during the class to really build a more just really robust document to study from.
I had quite a long break between high school and college of about 13, 14 years, maybe more. Don't even really recall what I did in high school for mathematics, but coming to the four-year college and starting with calculus, pre-calculus in the summer, then calculus in the fall, it was difficult, to say the least. So I had to come up with creative ways to take notes, know when to stop taking notes and pay attention to what's going on in the classroom. Because sometimes the professor may be saying or doing something and you're so busy just trying to keep up with them that you miss something important. And in a technical course, especially in mathematics courses, it's the little details that you need to be really, really focused on. So I had to, like I said, create strategies that worked for me. And one of them was just taking very meticulous and partitioned notes. When you develop a sense for when the subject matter is kind of going in another direction, and you can block off what you were just talking about in the lecture and move on to the next thing. Just separate it with a thick line. Headers on all the notes, always. That way, for quick referencing, if I want to go back and find a specific formula or a specific theorem that we were talking about, I can always find it because I have everything referenced with headers.
In the military, I find that there were a couple different ways to listen to different material being presented. With standard kind of briefs on topics that were covered frequently and kind of have the same material multiple times a year, and you don't really, you're familiar with it, so you don't really need to be paying that close attention, just need to kind of be awake, is very different from, prepping for a mission into a new area and, doing a rehearsal of concept, a rock walk, building a terrain model, going through the information multiple times, doing map reconnaissance, really understanding what the area looks like in a two-dimensional way, building it out in a three-dimensional way, just training and practicing on similar buildings or whatever it is that you're doing, but then, getting to a point where, you have your company commander is explaining the mission as a whole, and you really do need to be taking notes for those last minute details of what is your squad, your fire team specifically going to be doing. Which flare means what, what are all of the pieces of this, how do they come together, and not only being able to spit that back when called upon at random in the crowd for what you're doing, but what is that other squad going to be doing, where are they, why are they there, so that everyone's on the same page. But really, you can't just be kind of passively listening and experiencing that brief, but really having to, again, figure out, distill, listen to, solidify what that information is that you're going to need to, again, engage with at a later time. And so similarly, that second form of more active listening and participation with the material, I find is what I try to do in lecture, and it's a way for me to really, there's a lot of benefits, but not having to spend as much time outside of class re-engaging with the material or trying to figure out what it's about from the book on my own. You know, I try to never be late to class and not miss any classes, so which I find a lot of people are less strict about, because they're like, well, I can just figure it out from the homework and turn it in on time and that'll be fine, which is an option, but I think I personally think that's a waste of time, frankly. You know, you're in lecture, use the time, and again, doing lots of credits and trying to do extracurriculars and have a social life, maybe. Being able to really spend that time as efficiently as possible. It's kind of a way to, again, your notes are a better document to study from. You're getting your money's worth in the class, you know, as well as kind of finding those moments of dissonance where you maybe realize, oh, I don't understand that concept as well as I thought I did, or I must have missed something. What is this? And being able to ask a more pointed question, having that feedback from the professor, you know, you have a 10-second answer, which sums it up, instead of an hour and a half with your textbook trying to figure out what is this about and what did I miss? Where is it? It's just, again, it's kind of using your time more efficiently and not wasting your time or anyone else's. So.
For me, iterative note review was very helpful because when I first came to college, I thought I was a rote memorization learner. You know, when I was at DLI, when I was learning a language, that's how I learned. And I thought, I'm going to translate this to college. It didn't work for me. So I had to figure out something else to do in order to survive. So what I learned was that I needed to take a little bit of time after each lecture and throughout my week to review the notes that I had taken. So in class, typically teachers teach modularly, and they give you like this overarching idea of what they're about to discuss. So I would kind of highlight that. I'd give, you know, myself the general idea in the notes, and after the lecture, I would take maybe 10-15 minutes and just go over the most important points in my own words, in my own language, you know, so that I could synthesize it and distill it. And that really helped me for the next lesson as well. You know, it was informing how I was learning, and it was great for me to be able to, you know, have another way to memorize this stuff. So I guess the most easy way to do this is to study it immediately after the lecture, and then the next time you have that lecture, go over that again in conjunction with the following lecture. And once you do that a couple of times, it becomes second nature. And I started realizing after maybe like the third or fourth time I reviewed it for maybe like 10 minutes, so not a huge investment of my time, I just knew it. And I didn't really have to go over it 100 million more times. And I didn't have to cram before my test, which was so helpful, because for me, cramming doesn't work. It stresses me out, and I would not know key pieces of information. So that is why iterative note review was so helpful for me.
Iterative note review for me is something that was presented to me in one way, and over time I sort of tweaked to fit a little bit better with my style. So what I do, instead of kind of, you know, setting aside a separate block of time every day to go back through my notes and refresh all of that, is when I'm actually doing the homework for that class, since that's time I am setting aside for it anyway, is, you know, before starting the homework, kind of taking that 10-15 minutes, whatever, to go back through a bit in my notes and to read back through, which also gives me the opportunity to correct things that maybe I wrote down wrong, you know, that I understand a little bit better now after a few more lectures, and oh, okay, I misunderstood that, and so I can kind of correct that in my notes. So again, but kind of re-cementing those dates, those numbers, those facts of whatever kind, and then coming into the homework having that fresher understanding again, you know, because rushing from one class to another and kind of changing gears really rapidly, there's a tendency I find to forget a lot of what just happened, which is, again, I try to really take good notes during lectures so that when I am coming back to it during homework, it's something I can kind of click that switch and refresh again to bring back to the forefront. And so, again, trying to really use my notes as more of a living document that I'm working with throughout the semester. So.